Hi, I'm Michael Sazin, the Parrot Wizard. I've got Kili, my Senegal parrot, Rachel, my blue and gold macaw here with me today. And today I'd like to talk to you about what's easier to have, a small parrot or a big parrot. This is a very important question to anyone who's getting their a parrot for the first time. But it's also an important question if you already have a parrot and are considering getting another parrot. Well, what's going to be easier? What kind of challenges are you ready and up for? And what do you need to know about parrots big and small? You can check out my complete collection of Parrot Wizard videos, articles, lots of things that'll either help you get set up getting your parrot for the very first time or help you with your existing parrot, as well as all of my Parrot Wizard products that will help bring an enhanced behavioral and relationship experience between you and your parrot. So let's get right into the topic. What's easier to have, a little parrot like this, even smaller like a budgie, or a big macaw, bigger parrots in general? Well, the obvious answer, or the common answer, might seem to be that the little parrots are easier. And I'll talk about in what aspects they are as well, but I really want to take this from both sides and maybe shed some light on some things you didn't realize or haven't heard about. So let's go right to the obvious first. What's easier about a small parrot that might be difficult with a big parrot? Well, first of all, space. Small parrot, small space. They don't take up as much space. They can live in a smaller environment, a smaller cage, a smaller apartment. If you don't have a lot of room for a big bird, then a small bird may be the logical step. It's easier to have a small bird in a small living environment than a big bird. If you only have a one-room studio, then having a cage that takes up half your room might not be easy. So naturally, smaller bird, smaller size, smaller space requirements. Next thing that's easier about smaller parrots is, well, they're easier on the weight. They're not as heavy. You can hold them on your hand or on your shoulder for a longer time. The bigger parrots can get quite heavy, and you may need a stand to be able to set them down, not to destroy your arm holding them all day. Furthermore, when it comes to budget, smaller birds are smaller expense in general in all ways. First of all, the smaller birds are less expensive to acquire in the first place. Generally speaking, not an absolute rule, but the smaller the bird, the lower the price. The bigger the bird, the bigger the price. So smaller price is, of course, an easier thing to be able to accomplish. But don't just get hung up on the price of the bird. You also have to think about the parrot care and the supplies. And of course, a bigger cage, more expensive. Bigger stands, bigger toys, bigger food, bigger diet, bigger appetite means the bird's going to eat through more food. So in that way, obviously money-wise, the bigger the parrot, whether you got the bird for free or paid full price for it, it's still going to be bigger expenses to take care of a bigger bird, and bigger expenses are a more difficult thing. So in that aspect, smaller birds are easier to be able to afford their natural day-to-day care that you might have to provide. Now on the flip side, something in between, the medium, the thing that doesn't really go either way, veterinary care. Veterinary care doesn't really care if the bird is big or small. It's the vet's time that is spent and the amount of time to examine or take care of a small sick bird or a big sick bird is pretty much the same price. So whether you have a parrot big or small, you have to be ready for pretty big expenses on the veterinary care side. Life expectancy, generally speaking, the smaller birds have a smaller life expectancy, the bigger birds have a bigger life expectancy. But don't expect that to play any role into whether it's an easier or a harder pet to keep. When people think about, a short lifespan animal that maybe only lives a year or two, like, a rat, a hamster, something like that, the commitment, the long-term commitment about being able to take care of the animal for a long time isn't as big of a challenge. But with parrots, if you got something that's going to live 20 years or 100 years, that's such a long time away that I really don't believe it makes it any easier or more difficult of a decision to make. We really got to be able to think about our commitments, think about what we're able to do, and if you find that this is the right pet for you and you're happy with your pet and your pet loves you and everything is going great, 5 years down the line, 10, 20, 50 years down the line, you'll be able to figure out how to make it work out or what to do if you can't. So I don't really believe that the life expectancy makes it any easier or harder to choose between a small and a large parrot. Hey Rachel. Hey sweetie. So now let's talk about some of the slightly less obvious things that maybe you weren't aware of that I think in some ways make big parrots to be easier in some ways. So when it comes to behavior, I think it's a bit of a misconception that smaller parrots are easier and bigger parrots are more difficult. And indeed, there's plenty of small parrots that are hard and many big parrots that are hard, and vice versa. The thing that I think that makes the larger parrots easier in terms of behavior is not the behavior itself, but the pace. So I think the behavior between small and large parrots is actually quite similar. The training requirements, the care, the patience, the things you need in order to be able to take care of either size, as small or a large, medium parrot in fact, are quite similar, and behavior is quite similar. However, the pace is different. The little birds, everything's happening more quickly. They move around more quickly, they learn more quickly, they forget more quickly. So it's a different pace. The big parrots, on the other hand, they are closer in pace to us humans, so it's a little bit more natural for us. It makes a little bit more sense. They step a little slower. They give you a little more warning before they might bite. They might be, first they might raise their feathers, and then they might do some bluff beak snapping in the air, and then they finally nail you, and it took 10 seconds of warning or a minute of that warning before it actually happened. You can perceive that agitation in real time and be aware that that's going to happen. Little parrots, it's almost like bite and then show you the signs. It happens so quickly. The warning signs might be there, but they might have only been there for half a second, and then they bite because everything's happening more quickly. So in that sense, the little birds can be a little bit harder to read and keep up with because they move in a much quicker atmosphere. And the smaller you go, when you're down to a budgie, they are all over the place. You get up to a big macaw, they're much more calm and sedate, and all the other birds fall somewhere in between. Now let me talk about mess. The obvious answer would be that bigger bird, bigger mess, more difficult. And of course, that definitely is true to that extent, but there's another aspect of it to think about. The smaller birds poop more frequently. They poop in more different places. The little birds, they tend to just be a lot more energetic and move around. A little bird can go and poop in 5 different places in your room in the span of an hour, and that's 5 different places. You might have to discover that poop and try to clean it up, and 5 times more frequently that it happens. On a larger parrot, to some degree, they're going to poop bigger. They're going to chew up food and leave more crumbs. They're going to chew up more toys. There's going to be more physical material. That's a bigger mess. But it's also much more likely to be concentrated to a much more particular space. So, for example, Rachel's on a training perch right now with a tray, and any of that mess will end up in that tray. You get into a smaller bird, and they might fly under your window shades, and then fly onto your bed, and then fly under your chair. And because they're smaller and there's relatively more space in a room for them to get around, they could actually end up leaving a mess for you in many more places and much more frequently. And then at that point, it's hard to say which one is an easier bird. Is it the bird that you have to fill up a whole bag full of garbage to take the mess out for? Or the bird that's going to make just a few little poops, but they're spread out all over your room, and good luck finding them. Yeah, Rachel's showing her wings. So that one, you be the judge. That's why I want to bring it up to you that what you consider to be an easier parrot, the big one or the small one, is a bit more subjective and depends more on how your lifestyle is formed. Do you have a large space to live in or a small space? Do you have the patience to work with a bird that's bigger and going to move at a slower pace, take longer time to learn? Or are you energetic and high-paced and ready to keep up with one of those smaller birds? Now, when it comes to relationship and bonding, oftentimes I think people think that the smaller birds are easier to bond with, or sometimes the bigger birds are easier to bond with. And frankly, I don't think it matters either way about size, about being able to bond with them. I've been able to have a great relationship with each of my parrots, big or small. And what I've found it really comes down to is the approach you use, first and foremost, using training and behavior to be able to get the bird to be at ease and comfortable and understand what you want and have mutual relationship and understanding, and the bonding process as well. Furthermore, though, I believe it depends much more on species than it does on their size. So some birds tend to be much more flock animals, much more flock oriented, and then macaws and a lot of the big parrots tend to be. They tend to be much better with other birds of the same species, and if they accept humans to be like their family, then they'll extend that to humans as well. Now, Senegals, for example, it's not because they're small, it's just the way they are. They don't tend to be flock birds, they tend to be very mate bonded. So they can tend to have a very, very strong bonded relationship with one person, but then they could be quite aggressive in trying to drive away other people. So from that perspective, and in that sense, the Senegal might be a bit more difficult behavior-wise, especially toward other people, but it's not because of the size, it's more about the way that the species is. So in that case, another small parrot of pretty small size, like a green cheek, might be very friendly and open to relationships with people and much more tending to bond. So it's not a size issue at that point, it's species and training. Now when it comes to biting, the obvious answer might seem that the bigger the bird, the bigger the beak, the bigger the bite, and the harder of a pet they would be to keep. In my opinion though, and in the relationship that I try to build with a parrot, the lessons I teach, I try not to have any biting from a parrot, whether it's big or small. Those small birds bite hard and it hurts too, and their beaks are very sharp. The big birds can do a lot of damage. But at the same time, anything that we as humans do to our birds that leads them to biting, we're already inflicting discomfort on them, whether it's invading their territory that makes them bite out of territorial aggression, or try to touch them when they're uncomfortable with it. Anything we do that ends up leading to biting is already straining and hurting the relationship in the first place. So when you follow the Parrot Wizard approach that's outlined in my book, The Parrot Wizard's Guide to Well-Behaved Parrots, as well as throughout my videos and website, you will learn how to have a great relationship with your parrot without any biting. And then at that point, whether the beak is big or small, the size of the parrot should not really play a role into whether or not it is a difficult bird. Things that are going to be difficult are just, can you afford bigger stands? Do you have room for the bigger cage? Do you have the ability to do bigger things? So that's my opinion. I can't say that bigger birds, smaller parrots are easier or harder. I think there's different pros and cons of each. You have to look and evaluate your situation and what you have the ability and space for, and then find the bird that's really right for you. I'll have lots more Parrot Wizard videos coming soon addressing all different topics about parrot care, but in the meantime you can check out my complete collection of over 600 Parrot Wizard videos. The easiest way to browse them is at parrotwizard.com/videos. And also you can check out my parrot training supplies that help enhance your relationship with your parrot, such as my training perches, parrot training scale, tree stands, and lots more. Wonderful toys, trick training props, fun things and activities that will help bring you and your parrot closer together. And all of that is available at parrotwizard.com. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Hey, Rachel.